Hello, everyone, and welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy. I'm the host of the show and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California. Interesting episode today. This is Jerry Stahl, a writer I love. If you don't know who Jerry is, why don't I read you his bio right now? Originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Jerry won a pushcart prize early in his writing career before taking a detour into writing erotica and for magazines like Hustler. This led to another detour, writing for TV and movies, although detour here might be incorrect, considering this has been a large chunk of his professional career. Jerry penned scripts for Alf, 30-something, Moonlighting, Twin Peaks, CSI, Marin, Escape at Dannemora, as well as films like Bad Boys 2. As an author, Jerry has written a number of incredible books and memoirs, including Perv, A Love Story, I, Fatty, Permanent Midnight, and his latest 999, One Man's Tale of Depression, Psychic Torment, and a bus tour of the Holocaust. I've read a lot of Jerry stuff before. 999, though, is what prompted me to write him. I think it's a classic. It is a wonderful book that I highly recommend to everyone. And like I said, I think we have an interesting talk. I don't know if it's a successful talk. I was pretty intimidated by Jerry. Nothing he did intimidated me necessarily, but just I tend to be cowed by people whose work I admire, whose work I hold in high esteem, who I think are doing something quote-unquote real. I mean, look, everyone I talk to on the show I like, but there are some people who get at the heart of things a little more than others, and it can intimidate me through no fault of their own. Also, it was interesting. I don't know if it was just that Jerry wanted to have more of a conversation, or, I might have been asking questions that maybe he's answered a lot before, but, he asked me a lot of questions as well. And I think he even challenged me in some places. I don't mean that in a bad way, but I mean, he asked me if there's anything I've been proud of that I've done in the entertainment industry, and I was kind of stymied a little bit. There are things I like that I've done, but as someone who has mostly just sold TV shows that don't get made, I don't know if there's anything that I was really... It made me think that I need to write things that I am proud of. There are plenty of things I've done that I'm proud of, such as music I've made, albums I've made. I mentioned in this my Substack, where I think I'm doing some interesting philosophical stuff. theslowdystopia.substack.com. If you want to read it, it's free. And I like some of the scripts I've written, but I don't know if I'm proud of them. Anyway, he challenged me to actually make some stuff that I'm proud of. So I appreciated that part of this. By the way, if you like this talk and you want to hear other talks that I've done, I've been doing this show for almost 13 years, and what I like to do here in the beginning is a little recommended if you like. If you like my talk with Jerry, maybe you want to hear me talk to other authors. Why, I've talked to Brian Evanson, Chuck Klosterman, Rick Moody, John Ronson, Harry Matthews, Sam Lipsyte. That's just a sampling. I've also talked to plenty of TV writers like, say, Damon Lindelof and Ron D. Moore, and hundreds of musicians and actors and comedians and all types of people from all different creative walks of life. So check out those episodes. Subscribe to the show, leave a review if you got 30 seconds. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Andy Beckerman, although we'll see if by the time this actually releases, if Twitter is still around. And coming up, I've got a lot of great episodes, including Kurt Wagner of the brilliant band Lamb Chop, Cliff Chang, the co-creator of Paper Girls. So stay tuned for those, but for now, let's talk to Jerry. Are you observant at all? Did you fast for Yom Kippur?
I missed it again, man. What about you?
I did. I was just going to ask, do you feel new? Like I was just drinking some water. And I was like, oh, it tastes so great after having not had any for like 24
Absolutely.
hours.
And, hats off to you. Yarmulke's off, man. Good for you. Did you go to like high holy services?
No, temple's really boring.
But are you an observant fellow?
No, I'm halfway. I'm not a cultural Jew, but I'm not an observant Jew. I'm like halfway in between, and where I guess I'm a moral Jew if I have to really like throw some kind of adjective on it.
That makes a lot of sense. I feel like as a lifelong guilty Jew, pretty much every day is a day of atonement, you know, fast or no fast. I'm feeling like shit about all the stuff I've done, and I'm basking in guilt. And I think I cover it. So by the official Day of Atonement, I'm sort of pre-atoned.
Yeah, that's actually what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about. I don't know if you saw the original email that I had sent, but I was like, I'm from Pennsylvania. And I was like, as a Jew from Pennsylvania drowning in Weltschmerz, I like to talk to other Jews from Pennsylvania who are also drowning in Weltschmerz. And I mean, partly like, look, some of the show is me just projecting my own ego onto other people and seeing where it
I would expect nothing less. Isn't that the point of having your own show?
Maybe. I think there are most other people like hide themselves in some way or are too repressed, even though I am repressed. Well, this is okay. So this is the thing. Like, I'll just say it and you can respond however it feels to you. But like I feel a lot of consonance with you, yet we're of two different generations. And I think that made a huge difference.
No doubt. Yeah. What are you, in your 20s?
I am I'm 43.
Like I say, yeah.
But like the thing I was thinking of, I was thinking of this yesterday, was like the Holocaust I think of as like a nuclear bomb for Jews. And like the closer you are in proximity to it, the more like you are like in the 40s, you were probably just like evaporated. But like in the 50s, and I'm like, you've got a radiation shadow and you've got like radiation poisoning, I think. And then by the time you get to like the 80s, it fucks you up, but in a different way. And I'm kind of curious about like, how early did you learn about it? And like, how do you think it like actually affected you when you were younger?
I think that's really a great metaphor, man. The nuclear Holocaust. I think it hit me more on my own. It was not discussed a lot in the family. You know, my old man came over by himself when he was 10 on a boat and clearly had a lifelong just heaviness of heart that he could never communicate, kept very to himself, and ultimately checked himself out at 49. And I think it's an internalized, almost cellular kind of thing, sort of below verbal, if that makes any sense. And when I, like everybody else, saw those pictures of the bodies, etc., it's almost like, oh, now I kind of understand what was behind and underneath these unspoken these unspoken emotions, the heaviness that I felt from my father, and but was never described.
What decade? When did he come over here? He came from Russia, right?
He came, Lithuania, which I guess it was Russia, Lithuania, back and forth. But then I saw his birth certificate. My sister dug it up, weirdly enough, and it said Ukraine. So go figure. It was all a mishmash back then. But yeah, he came over since he was 10, he was 1930.
Okay. Yeah, my grandparents are all from around there, like Romania.
Of course,
again,
yeah.
Like I want to say Poland, but it wasn't even Poland then. It was the Pale of Russia. So
that's exactly right. Yes. The Pale of Russia. Yeah, I had another grandfather on the other side come over to avoid conscription in the Tsar's army, which is what they did with Jews, So
yeah.
So are you 100% Uden? They'll kill you even if you're half, but I like you either way. I'm just curious.
Yeah, whatever quantum of Jewish blood you've got in you, they'll
just enough.
Yeah.
Even if you're a Michelin, as they say.
Yeah, but like that kind of heaviness, I don't know what to ascribe all that heaviness to in my family, right? Like, because my grandfather fought in World War II. So is it like PTSD that he comes back with and obviously like they don't talk about it then, right? They don't talk about what's going on.
Not that generation, allegedly.
What was the Thin Red Line? Well, there was one after that where I forget the author now, but like
James Jones.
yes. There was his unfinished third book, which was like looking at all the PTSD that
Really? I did not know about this.
it's great, but it's just like they come back from the war and they're all a mess and like just not
Wow.
acting right. And he never finished. I think he passed away before he finished it, but like what he did right was very good. So I don't know whether to ascribe that stuff to PTSD from my grandfather or to like just this like, again, this atomic bomb that went off and just like fucked everyone up.
Yeah.
Because it's also like, I'm curious, like no one talked about these things, right? It was all, you just had this trauma and you just like lived your life then.
Apparently, in retrospect, I know that my grandfather, who basically hit New York, Ellis Island, worked on the subways for a week, digging tunnels, and then said, fuck this, give me a bus ticket as far as I can get. Became a scrap guy, which was what a lot of Jews did. And which is a long-winded way of saying he made enough to bring a lot of people over. So all we ever said is that they came from the old country. That was like my early memories. Nobody ever said he was avoiding Hitler, or she escaping. It was always old country.
Yeah. So like so there's euphemisms or there's just like some, I was going to say shorthand, but just like, we're not going to really say everything that's happening. Here's just this stuff. And I mean, when you were younger, I'm using my parents unfairly, I think, as a kind of like rubric to like try to understand someone else. Like,
go ahead.
But like, I find them to be very repressed and very,
about this or about everything?
Well, everything, I think. And I also like, this is another thing where I'm like, is this Pennsylvania? Is this like
where in Pennsylvania? That covers a lot of territory.
Reading, Pennsylvania.
Oh, I know Reading. Okay, sure.
Not a bad place to grow up, but like Christian, like
Yeah, just like where I grew up, it was like mostly Catholic, sprinkling of Methodists, and no doubt full of what we used to call, and this is forgive the slander, but we used to call them hunkies, which were people who had accents. These were kids who somehow came over from like Hungary or what was that, Czechoslovakia, and their parents, brought them over at some weird age. And this wasn't even, it wasn't even a negative term. It was just, that's who they were, just like I was the kike.
Right. Exactly.
And there were no Jews in my neighborhood anywhere. So I don't know about you or in my grade school. What about Reading? Not a hotbed of Hasidim, I'm guessing.
We had one in my grade school. We had one Jew per grade school. So in my grade,
yeah.
And then in high school, it was the three of us were in our high school out of like 260 or 70.
Did you bond or did you avoid them?
We were friends because of religious school. We all went to the same temple.
Oh, you got bar mitzvah and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. But like, it was like, and also like our Judaism was pretty muted. Like obviously, right. Maybe not obviously, like we would, take off for the high holy days.
Sure.
And like, we didn't hide it, but we also weren't like, I wasn't like, wearing a tallis or anything like that to school.
Did you feel any shame about it? Like just kind of sort of this unspoken thing? Because I knew people, like I would be accused of killing Jesus when I was like in first grade, which I clearly must have done in a blackout because I had no memory. And, it affects you. You realize that people they feel a certain way, Did you have that?
Yeah, no. So this is the thing. It would like come out more as anger. Like, I mean, like if I got called a kike, which I mean, this is all very like few and far between. If people said shit about me, it was like privately, except for like one time, like, like my best friend was like out of nowhere, I wish Hitler had killed your family.
Nice. How old was he when he said that?
6th grade. I remember it was like.
Sounds about right. That's when it starts coming out. Yeah. I used to get you'd go to somebody's house and while trying not to comment on the weird smell, the mother would say something like, so you don't believe in Jesus? And, where do you go with that when you're like, 10?
Yeah. I don't know. It's the thing is, though, I I used it when I needed to. Like if I was at a
Sure.
friend's house and I didn't want to eat their food, I just said I was kosher. And then
Nice. Nicely done. Wow. Yeah.
they didn't know what it meant.
I would have been too embarrassed. I would have just hammered down the kielbasi slaw, and kept my pie hole shut.
Yeah, no, I was weirdly, or am still weirdly, okay with my identity. Like it didn't like,
Great. Yeah.
but still felt like alienated. That's the thing for
Yeah.
me. It was more alienating than anything else.
Was that Jew based, or was that just who you were and how you felt about things? Or maybe you separate them. Yeah.
I've been in therapy for years. I don't know what came first. Was it like I was strange?
Sure.
And the Judaism just reinforced that? Or was it I knew I was different because I had to explain Hanukkah to everyone?
Yeah. Which is no picnic. That's not great having to do that.
Yeah.
Did you know you were an artist at an early age? Did you know you have a certain feeling about things? Because artists tend to, that old Hemingway line, the best gift any writer can have is an unhappy childhood,
No, this is the thing. This is why, besides being a fan of your work, like I wanted to talk to you because like
Sure.
I was very repressed and I don't think you were repressed, at least from, the way that you talk about your past.
All right. Well, I'm not too repressed to talk about how repressed I was, but I grew up pretty shut down and mortified. And, I'm that guy who is pretty laconic in general, but will say any crazy ass shit about myself in a book, which always like kind of freaks, girlfriends or friends out. It's like, well, you won't talk about it, but you'll say this in a fucking book, but you know?
Okay. So it is, yes, I understand that. The ability to put all that stuff into art, but like in real life, you are unable to express it. I get that. Yes.
Yeah, I think so. I was pretty, I guess I was kind of the class clown, but it was repression. I was always like a little country, little uncool. Like when I hit New York, I got shipped away to high school in Pottstown, for 2 years. It's a whole other thing, and had to go to Episcopalian chapel every day on mescaline. So that worked out. But by the time I hit New York, I realized I wasn't like a sophisticated kid, I was like this Pittsburgh. I almost felt like I was backwoods, Wasn't a sophisticate. What about you? You probably were.
Oh, well, yeah, but that's because, like, again, I think by the time I was in high school, I was getting cool culture filtered to me from like my friends' older brothers who had been in
That's
college.
it. Yeah, I got that.
I was reading literature. My mom's an English teacher before she
really?
retired. So like they were feeding me like Beckett, and they were feeding me, cool literature. So
Yeah.
I went into like, they had they had like the panoply of all the like standard like books you get in college in the 70s, like Sartre and all this stuff. I didn't understand it, but I was reading it.
Sure. Yeah.
So I did feel a little cool from that. And I think that's also, again, this like what allowed me to find some kind of, I don't know, solace. I don't know what the word I really want is, but like in like being alienated from everything was like, okay, but at least the media, at least the cultural stuff, like shows that I'm cool or hip or something, or, obviously not to the people I was hanging out with in high school, but like,
yeah,
in general culture.
Were you a happy kid?
Yeah, relatively, I think. But again, who knows? Like,
yeah,
it was all repressed.
Have you blown that repression out of the water now? Are you like footloose and fancy free in your personal and professional life?
Emotionally.
Well, that's great, man. You seem pretty loose and in touch with yourself, which is great.
Yeah.
It's necessary for this gig.
Yeah. It's hard fought, right?
Yeah, you earned it.
Yeah. But it's just interesting. Like, this is the thing. I guess one of the things I was like, oh, well, you can't be that repressed, at least especially like, I don't know, like reading Permanent Midnight, or like at least like thinking about like, you wrote erotica. Like, you can't be that repressed. Even if you can write, like if I was going to write erotica, I would be like, her Whosis was glistening. I don't know. I was really stretching there. You could hear the
Or
ellipsis.
who's this listening? Yeah, well, you can't confuse writing fake, penthouse sex letters or Beaver magazine stories with actually necessarily getting laid in real life. You know what I mean? I would like sit on one side of my desk and ask the penthouse question, my girlfriend has a Bush Light Castro's beard, and should I like that? Then I would go around to the other side of the desk and I would answer the question. But it wasn't from voluminous experience, I mean, a bit, but I wasn't some total roue, at a young age.
But I would say even as an adult, like I could feel the repression in my, like I'm pretending to type right now with my fingers and I can feel them seize up as if I were going to write something like that.
Really? So sex is not a big part of your oeuvre?
Well, I think this is a generational thing. Where you grew up in the 50s and the 60s, whereas I grew up in the 80s and in the 90s with DARE and AIDS epidemic.
Yeah, good point.
Frightened me off drugs and sex for a while.
How could it not? That's so interesting. Were you also, in a situation where you had friends dying, or was it more like AIDS was out there and it was terrifying?
My cousin died. My cousin, he lived in New York. I didn't even know he was gay until we went to his funeral. Interesting. And
did the family not talk about it, or was it just something you didn't know?
We did. I mean, he was out, and there was no problem with it, right? Like, it's not like my parents were.
Well, that's cool for Reading.
But like, they didn't know how to talk to me about that kind of stuff. Again, this is where I'm trying to like figure out this repression, how it like got into you and how you got out of it, I suppose.
Well, I wouldn't have to bust out of it if I hadn't been so fucking repressed as a kid. I mean, my father, rest in, peace, took me aside when I was like about 10 because I had a best friend. And I think we went to the circus or some bullshit, and he thought we were holding hands. So he thought I was like a young homo, as he put it, or as they put it, and they asked me, like, were you holding hands with Kenny? And I was mortified because, your parents think you're gay. That's not cool, So I guess I was super repressed in the sense that all things sexual were shameful, and I was shamed at an early age. Like, my earliest memories are that, So I think I was probably pretty repressed, or else I wouldn't have swung so far the other way when I busted out,
Mm-hmm. Like, the shame is familiar, but it had nothing to do, at least nothing overtly to do with being Jewish. It had to do with it had to do with being corporeal, I think.
You mean having a body?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, I mean, mine was like that. If you stain your underpants one more time, I'm going to hang them on the line for all your friends to see. And, what do? I go on to make a career out of like, hanging my dirty underpants on a line. It's like mom threatened, So go fucking figure.
Do you think it's that linear, like the dialectic is?
Of course not, but we're simplifying for podcast purposes. Of course, it's very nuanced, but on some level, kind of, sort of, half, maybe true.
I mean, did you have ambitions when you were younger? Did you know you wanted to be a writer?
I just knew, because I grew up. I had an older sister who was a hippie. Her boyfriend's the one who turned me on to all the cool fucking books. Where, I didn't know you were allowed to say shit. Like, I remember reading The Dream Life of Balzo Snell by Nathaniel West, and there was a line in there, written while sniffing the forefinger of my left hand, which, I don't know, seems so insanely dirty and creepy to me. I didn't even know you're allowed to write that shit. So it was more like I knew what I didn't want to do. I didn't want a straight gig, and I didn't have the chops to be a musician, which is what everybody wanted to be. Fucking, everybody wants to be Keith Richards. So I really wanted to be a writer. I thought if you can like sit in the room and at that time, smoke pot and have crazy ass ideas and get paid for it, what could be fucking better if you can line that up? Even if it's the backs of cereal boxes, it's still being a writer,
Did you feel that it was like an actual possibility though? Or was it just like a kind
No,
of like,
I never met a writer. I didn't even know how that would happen. It was like I never had a writer's sighting as a young man. It was like an albino rhinoceros or something. I just never saw it, didn't know it. But eventually, went to Columbia, started writing for the Village Voice, started writing this and that, and I sort of horned my way in. And I don't know if it was ambition. It's just that I was just kind of scared of ultimately starving and having to get a normal job because I was too big of a weirdo to get like a day job. It's not like I was some ultra cool rebel. I just, I had a lot of limitations because I was, despite the writing, I was a pretty self-conscious, uptight guy.
well, I guess that was my next question. That was like, how self-aware were you of all of this? Like, how self-aware were you of being a weirdo or whatever?
Well, I was a pretty uncomfortable in my own skin, and pretty solitary. And I was living in New York City. I was, it's like my secret life was that I had no life. I just stayed home and read all the time. And like punk was happening. And I knew some people. I knew a guy who was, drummer for Blondie in early days and, went to CBGBs and all that shit. But my whole life, I've never been a part of, which I know is the textbook cliche writing thing. But I just, I wasn't in there with the cool kids. I was always an outsider.
Did you want to be though?
Yeah, I think I would have liked to be, but it was just beyond comprehension. It was sort of like what writing was originally. Like, I don't know how does a human even do this? I was, whether it was from shame or what the fuck, I was just, I just wasn't comfortable hanging out with people. I could get girlfriends, do that periodically and go there, but I wasn't in bars. I wasn't going to parties and stuff. Were you a young popular fellow?
No, I was not an outcast necessarily. Like I had a good group of friends, but like I still don't like most people today even.
You ever find doing a podcast that you don't like the person you're talking to? Like you just realize, God, why did I do this?
I have, and then I don't release them. Like there are a handful.
Oh, really? And those people, those who know.
They do now.
Wow. Oh, sorry to put you on the spot.
I don't care. I'm pretty much an open book at this point. But it's
you don't like people. I get it. Is it like the Jonathan Swift thing where it's like I loathe mankind but like every Tom, Dick, and Harry? Or do you kind of not even like Tom, Dick, or Harry?
Yeah, reverse that. I love mankind and I hate Tom, Dick, and Harry.
Oh, fascinating. So conceptually, you're a people person, but in real life, you don't like people.
Yeah, I can turn it on if Of
course, you're a pro.
Like I'm in this business. I'm in a meeting. I have to turn it on, but like,
yeah.
I would rather be alone reading, I think, most of the time.
Yeah. Have you created a life where you can make a living? I don't even want to say doing what you want to do, but not doing what you don't want to do.
Yes. I went to grad school.
That's huge, man. That's huge. Hats off.
I went to grad school for philosophy and I was a professor for a while. And it all like...
Really? Where were you a prof?
Temple in Philadelphia.
Nice. Yeah.
And
philosophy professor. Okay.
It was not what I want. I wanted, see, this is the thing where also like, I'm trying to like figure out about you where like I repressed all these desires. I repressed any kind of ambition. I thought my parents had kind of like shoveled out a pathway, a rut for me. And I was just going to roll down that into the grave. Right. That's really,
that's nice. I mean, in a way, it was a pathway. I mean, I think I might have been, I'm not to brag, but I might have been a little more crippled than you. So I didn't have the option. It never even occurred to me to try and be a professor. I wish I would have loved to teach, when I've taught in prisons and shit, not like academic stuff. And, I just couldn't take straight gigs. So that's why, the porn, the journalism, and in journalism, the kind of stories I wrote, because I was such an uptight person, I would put myself in these egregiously uncomfortable situations. And then I'd have to do like Quaaludes or something to go to like a nude singles retreat weekend and then write about, the weirdness of like being in the buffet line with like, people's genitals gently touching the chicken salad, and just writing about how massively uptight I was. So sort of a combo platter.
I mean, how did you discover drugs?
Well, I had an older sister who lived out in Berkeley, and I think I stole some of her mescaline when I was about 14. I want to put this on her. And, never even been drunk. And suddenly, like, buses are coming out of the sky. And I'm such a little dweeb, as like stars are imploding on the side. I'm like, will this affect my grades? I mean, that's the kind of badass I was out of the gate.
Yeah.
And then I got into weed and, the rest of it just kept going.
But that's the thing. My parents, and I think it was the dare age again, my parents had put the fear of God.
Did you really lock in? Did the dare lock in for you? They scared you were scared straight.
Literally, yeah. I thought that like this would ruin the rest of my life. Like my dad had told me the old like who knew what my dad. Again, my dad was 18 in 1968, right? Like he was right there for whatever was going on. Man.
Yeah, 1950. So freakishly, I am 3 years like younger than your dad. Wow. Sometimes it's embarrassing to still be alive. I'm just gonna put it out there. It's so bad for your cred.
It's just embarrassing. I mean, I'm embarrassed to be alive. Like,
yeah, I know what you mean. Well, but was your dad a hippie? Did he partake? Did he smoke weed? And then hide it from the kids?
Yes.
Nice. Did you find his stash?
No, like, I mean, by the time they had us, I don't think my mom ever did anything. Like, she barely does. She doesn't even like alcohol.
Yeah.
I don't think he was doing anything. Like he'll have like a glass of wine with dinner at most.
Yeah. Well, he sowed his wild oats, it sounds like.
Like my sister's a little more adventurous. So like he like confided in her that, that he had smoked pot or done whatever. And, but like told me that like, if you do acid, you'll jump out the window.
Sure. Well, it was common knowledge that that's what would happen back then. Yeah.
But that's the thing where like my mortality is like so close to my face. Like it's just so like present. That
why is that? Are you scared of, you mean death is omnipresent? Is that what you mean by mortality?
Yeah.
Your whole life? Did somebody close to you die at an early age? What triggered that?
By the time I was born, 3 of my grandparents were already dead. My grandmother died when I was 12. Yeah. Our family dies very early. Like just like.
No, I mean, my old man died, checked himself out at 49, so totally get it. Had a very early acquaintanceship with death.
Yeah. Like, I mean, incredibly intimate.
Yes. Well, did you see your grandparents die? Were they sick in bed being tended in your house, or were they shipped off to the Shalom rest home?
I watched my grandmother wither away from cancer. She had melanoma. I watched her wither.
Man, okay. So you're a boy, you're seeing this, and you loved her?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, case closed. Man, it makes perfect sense. So were you scared of death or just like aware that the clock is always ticking?
Vacillates between the two.
Yeah. Have you led an adventurous life?
I've led a life I enjoy. I wouldn't call it adventurous.
That's
exactly.
Huge. Listen, if you can figure out a way to do that, you got it made, man.
But like having like your dad die so early and the Holocaust. The thing, this is where I keep coming back to the Holocaust because like I learned about it when I was 6 or 7. And so like knowing not only that death is omnipresent, but that like mass death is omnipresent and that it's happening all the time. And people want like 50% of like our holidays are about surviving genocide, like a full 50% of them.
Never thought of it that way. Yeah. Wow. Well, also, my awareness of the Holocaust was tied into like, there's people out there who want you fucking dead, so part of being called like Yid and everything is that these people wanted to fucking kill you. And you saw the pictures of the bodies piled up in mounds. And, it was, there was a certain amount of terror behind it. But I don't know. I mean, you probably know this, but for a while after the Holocaust, even survivors didn't talk about it for like 10, 20 years. It was not discussed, even among Jews, from what I have read, what I have heard. It sort of became more of a thing like about a generation later.
Yeah, I mean that's like an entire. That's not just like repression on an individual level. I mean, we're talking about an entire group repressing.
Yeah, yeah. For go ahead.
No, just and that's the atmosphere you kind of grew up in. It seems.
Mm-hmm. How did your issues with mortality affect your work?
I mean, it shows up in the work. I think there's a lot of like people grappling with death or wanting to murder. You know, I'm writing a pilot now about someone who's trying to kill a billionaire. You know, not that it'll do anything, but just out of pure spite and revenge. So, I mean, there is a lot of this.
You mean you're writing it out of pure spite and revenge, or he wants to kill the billionaire out of pure spite and revenge?
They want to kill them out of pure spite and revenge. Although
you do a lot of show business work. Forgive me for not knowing your entire past.
No. Yeah. I essentially sell shows that and write pilots that don't get made. But
yeah, I made a living writing movies that didn't get made for many years, and then I stepped off that train regretfully. I couldn't deal. I mean, speaking of mortality, I didn't even want to be the guy with like the beautiful house, and I'm not whining because there's nothing more grotesque than a whining screenwriter or repulsive. But I just didn't want to be that guy who like had nothing. That's why I've always written books along with the soon to be never made Hollywood shit, you know?
Yeah.
Did anything made? Is there anything you're proud of that like made it through?
No, but I've also only recently, I got a really late start because I was a professor and it like, I just couldn't, what I really wanted to do was do this stuff. I could not admit it to myself. And I had to like, I blew that up. I blew up grad school and I blew up my PhD. Again, total, like now I can see it. I'm like, oh, obviously I was doing it like unconsciously. Like I saw the moves, but then it was just like, oh, they'll be okay with me like writing my dissertation about how shitty they are. Like it was essentially I was writing a dissertation about how bad the academic philosophy is in America.
Oh, that's classic. Oh man, how was it received?
They hated it. They're like, he knows what he's doing. The scholarship is good.
Do you have a PhD in philosophy now?
No.
Are you hair doctor?
No, I am hair master.
Hair master. We're all masters. Yeah.
The thing I think about is like, okay, so if you're growing up in both this like cultural repression and also like feeling a kind of like familial or personal repression, you know, how do you ever break out of that to be a writer? Right. Cause
I'll tell you, I mean, because hippiness was happening and shit was blowing up and, you know, there was, you know, all these bands living forbidden lives and cool ass writers living what seemed like just the cool ass lives, you know, that you could even imagine. That seemed like, if not a possibility, it's like, that's something to strive for. I want to be one of these motherfuckers like Tasha's or something, you know, guys that write for Cream or, you know, or Hunter Thompson, obviously big role model, you know, along with the Beckett's and the rest of it, you know, but in real time on the ground, these guys were doing cool shit. I just admired the fuck out of that, envied it, wanted to do it. By the time I arrived, like hippiedom was kind of dead, but I was also kind of too old for punk. So I was like in between, you know, I was a tweener. But that was, to answer your question, that was the sort of wormhole I thought I could maybe shimmy through was, you know, writing that outside crazy shit that I love so much, you know, essentially what you were doing in your doctorate, just saying how fucked up everything is.
But how did you know you couldn't do a straight job?
Because I'd had some, you know, I mean, I had gigs, you know, I worked in a Xerox store, you know, I tried, you know, I could do them, but it was just like, you know, I was high all the fucking time, you know, making copies upside down, you know, people weren't thrilled, you know, stuff like that. And then, you know, when I finally staggered out of college, I just kept writing. It never even occurred, you know, why didn't I go into publishing? Why didn't I, you know, get even a staff gig on a magazine or something? Because I was, you know, banging shit out for all these glossies, as they used to be called, but it just never occurred to me that I could even do it, because I think the same thing that defined my writing and gave it an urgency kept me from getting that straight gig, which is a sense, if you get to know me, you're going to think I'm creepy. So I'm going to, keep you at arm's length.
Okay. So there was, there was the self-awareness mixed with this, self-deprecation, I guess.
Well, more like self-deprecation was like on a good day, more like utter and soul-crushing self-loathing, which came from, I've read that Jewish moms can sometimes do that. I'm not going to lay that off on her. Maybe you're just born the way you're born, but didn't help, being sort of cremated at birth, so to speak, psycho-emotionally.
Yeah,
Did your parents love you? Did you have a loving mom and dad?
Yes.
Well, we can still be friends. It's okay.
They as much as I blame a lot of the repression on them, and blame in quotes, I don't really blame them. I just say that's the way it was, right?
Well, you couldn't be here if you didn't go there.
Yeah.
You seem like you're in a good spot.
They were very loving, and I think that's the two emotions were love and anger.
Love and anger. Well, let me ask you this. I always admired these people who were raised like the Kennedys to have tremendous self-confidence. My sense was that it would be a miracle if I could fucking do anything, given what I had been told, the information I received about my own self. You know what I mean? You're special, but you're warped.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it the Kennedy. I wouldn't call it confidence either, because I didn't have the confidence in myself or in my artistic pursuits until I moved to New York and started trying to do this stuff for real.
Yeah. How'd that go in the first couple of years?
Scraping by, taking classes at UCB, whatever job I could get.
Really? UCB. Cool.
I wanted to be like Bob and David, like Mr. Show, if you know that.
Of course. Yeah, I know the best. Yeah. I met those guys early on before they blew up via Stiller. And man, there's nothing like it. So you wanted to be on stage. See, I loved stand-up comedy, but I couldn't imagine myself doing it, because that would involve doing the most dread thing of all, which is leaving my fucking apartment,
I do.
And let's not go crazy,
But that's the thing. I'm good at it. I'm good baseline. I'll never be great. And I can recognize it, but I think I'm a very good writer, and I could be probably a great writer, the older I get. And I know that no matter whatever the self-loathing and a kind of lack of self-confidence that I have will always stop me from becoming a great performer.
You still perform?
With my wife is a great stand-up, and so we do a podcast together.
Should I ask? May I ask?
Yeah, you might not know her. She's younger. Naomi Akparagan. She's got a special on Netflix.
I only know a lot of these people because, I'm friends with Marin. So, I sort of stumble into the Comedy Store a lot, and I hear a lot about comics. And he often has openers who are new people, Yeah. So, well, that's great, man.
Yeah, she was on WTF a month or two before your last episode, maybe.
Excellent.
But even so, watching her perform, I know what a great performer is, and I know where I am. So I know that that's the thing, that kind of lack of self-confidence that goes back to childhood, and that I kind of feel some kind of consonance with you.
Interesting. Yeah. What would you say you get out of feeling that way?
Nothing positive. It feels like a barrier between me and other people, if anything, literally a kind of invisible barrier that I'm pushing my hands up.
Well, maybe I asked that because I had this friend, kind of a mentor, Hubert Selby, if you know who that was.
Yeah.
And, he would always say, talk about feeling kind of the way you're describing, what do you get out of that? And, the upshot being, the embarrassing truth is, it's fucking comfortable. It takes a lot of heart to actually not feel that way, and a lot of balls. And that warm bath of misery, man, it's, sometimes hard to get up and drip yourself out of there, That's
a great way of putting it. I think about like this. there's an old model of electrons being like on levels, and the higher up they go on these levels, depending on whatever the element is, the more energy has to be put into these electrons, right? And in this little like bath of like self-loathing and lack of self-confidence is the lowest level. And I don't have to put if I want to be charming or charismatic, I can, but I have to put the energy into it and move up those electrons up a level or 2 or 3.
What is at the top level?
You can be a great performer, very charismatic all the time. It's a lot of energy. I'm just like, I get an hour a day maybe where I want to put that energy into it.
What are the other 23?
Lowest level energy, like just moving through the world.
Yeah, just slugging your way through.
I mean, do you think this stuff, I'm going to guess the answer is yes, but I'll ask it anyway. What, being in Pittsburgh at a time where like the anti-Semitism was somewhat high.
Somewhat, yeah. Still is. I mean, fucking guy running for governor is like, doesn't even want Jews to support him,
Right. But like at a time, like in the 80s, I got like every once in a while, right? Like I said, a friend wished it on Hitler kill my family, but like I wasn't getting it. I was going to say daily, even like weekly or monthly, right? It was like every once in a while, but it wasn't, it wasn't so in your face. I'm kind of wondering if that's part of this whole package of like creating shame and alienation.
Absolutely. I think that's a good point. I think it was not necessarily in your face. It was more like gravity. It was like a condition of being, which just sort of defined the world. And it was so omnipresent. I didn't like feel it specifically on any given day, and I had shame about it, man. I had to go to Sunday school on fucking Saturday, and, I lived in a neighborhood. My father wore a white shirt, like a suit to work, and everybody else was like, factory, the brewery, bakery, whatever, truck driver. I always felt different. And a large part of that was the Jew thing. But I didn't realize until much older how much what you're talking about operated.
Because like the thing I think about a lot about redundancies in people's lives. Like
interesting.
Like if you get a certain emotion at home, is that emotion also being reinforced in by your friends or by your school or in culture in general? And like you're having the shame at home, right? And then it also gets reinforced kind of in the rest of your life through like being Jewish in a very Christian area.
Yeah, well, I mean, Freud might call it repetition compulsion. Buddhists call it the wheel. It's the world, you assume it's reality and you act that way and it's all you know. So yeah, everything is some version of the same thing on a different level because that's the air you breathe, and I think the art of it, if you can break out, is to realize, well, maybe it's a fucking choice. And maybe just as a science experiment, I can try to go 5 minutes where I don't feel fucking alienated and despairing, just to see what that's like,
I mean, did you ever have that thought when you were younger, or did it take into like,
oh God,
your 30s?
No, God, 30s, 40s, 50s, man. No, I mean, even the title of the book, it's not just 999. It's one man's tale of, depression, psychic torment, and us toward the Holocaust. It's like, I realized how much that defines me. And I was trying to almost, it's like picking the dead cockroaches out of my cereal in some shitty New York diner. I was trying to see how that manifests in all areas. And if I understand your question, which is always a dubious proposition, I mean, I think it's all of a piece. You see the world through, you refract it that way through your, whatever lens you've been building all these years. And, it takes a certain amount of effort to just let it go and see there's another way to be, because it is familiar. And safe.
But I mean, was there a point where like, regardless of whether you achieved it or not, and again, obviously you said you're still struggling with this kind of stuff, but you become self-aware of it and you're like, well, maybe it is a choice or whatever. I'm going to struggle with this feeling and that's the direction I'm going to go in emotionally or existentially.
Yeah, you can try. I think half the battle is just being aware. Once you can name it, you got a fighting fucking chance, just to be aware of what you're doing doesn't necessarily mean you can change it. But once you see the pattern, then you're aware of it. And it's not as comfortable an old routine because it's like, yeah, I know what I'm doing. I see what I'm doing here and I'm still fucking doing it. It's almost like worse. It's sort of like after you give up dope or alcohol or whatever. And then when when you go back, if you do it again, it's like, it doesn't fucking work. I feel like I'm like going to kindergarten at 50, and trying to squeeze into the little chair. It just becomes this almost outmoded way of being that can still happen, that makes any sense.
Yeah. Like existential relapse.
Great way to put it. And a great title for a pilot, perhaps. What did you write that you're proudest of, even if it didn't get made?
For real? I don't know if I have, I've been writing essays lately that
Oh, that's great.
That I'm proud of.
Well, where could I read them? Like, where do essays show up these days?
Just online. I have a Substack that I started where I've been trying to, my big thing.
How's that going? How does Substack work? Everybody I know is doing that. And, it's intriguing.
If you have an audience, it's good. I've been doing it for free, just in the margins of like my actual writing.
Where you just post it on your Facebook or some shit, or Instagram, or you have your own blog?
Yeah.
I've
been trying to figure out this thing. Why is everything so weird now? And I've kind of traced it to the death of the Enlightenment in World War I. That ends any kind of like common belief in rationality and common belief in a singular culture. And it's just been this like, we've all grown up in this postmodern interregnum where there's nothing. There's nothing solid. It's just gotten worse and worse since then. I think the big thing is that in the 20th century, the right wing just murdered leftists left and right. So all we have left is like the center and the right at this point. And that's why the left doesn't have any kind of like cultural purchase. Not just like, that's obvious in the sense that like they have no political power, but like culturally things are weird because millions of leftists in the 20th century were just murdered.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're not part of the collective program of creating culture.
You're speaking globally.
Yeah.
They weren't necessarily murdered in America en masse, right?
Right. But I think scared from participating in culture after a certain point.
Yeah, of course. Sure.
Like once like Fred Hampton is murdered and once like, people are assassinated, you start to like kind of like, I'm going to back off this. Like, have you ever watched any of Adam Curtis's documentaries?
I love Adam Curtis. Are you kidding?
He's one of my favorites.
He's unbelievable. I live for that guy. Yeah.
Yeah. He documents a lot of the like the left kind of moving inward.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, and the thing I've been trying to figure out is like, well, why, what is stopping them from participating in the outward part? It's like they were scared. They couldn't control the outward part, but they could control the inward part.
Yeah. Do you think right now that is a practical issue or sort of a psycho-emotional issue for progressives?
The latter, both probably. Mm-hmm. You would have to like deal with the psycho-emotional stuff in order to then have any kind of solidarity.
Yeah. You feel the energy is more with the sort of the raging right than with progressives at this point.
There are grooves in culture that allow for right-wing fascism.
Yeah.
Whereas there are the grooves in culture for any kind of left-wing solidarity have been erased over the last 100 years or so.
That is true. I also think along with that, progressives aren't insane the way like the right wing is insane. They've clung to this crippling sense of like the rational, the things have to be real and make sense. Whereas the right, man, it's just like, the whole other side of the brain. you know?
Yeah.
And there's passion, a lot of passion behind that.
Yeah. And I think I really question this, and I don't know, maybe you have some thoughts of it since you're older than me, but like two things. One, did rationality ever really work, or was it just like, could you really convince someone with an argument? I don't know. Not in my lifetime, or it feels like not in my adult lifetime has rational argument been something that was a good tactic. And then if it was, when did we pass through the veil of the paradigm into this irrational world? I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Well, I think there was the illusion of discussion and argument in the 60s and 70s. But fast forward to our current media age, everybody's their own media centric conglomerate, So I don't think people are interested. Everybody just wants to blast it the fuck out. And it might be under the guise of being rational, but I think it's even more primitive. I think it's just like a scream into the fucking void. Are there writers you like? Not like, are there progressives you like? Like, I love Matt Taibbi sometimes. I love, I just, who's that? Blanking on that great woman the Russian lady, Masha Gessen.
Yes.
Can't pronounce her name.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some writers I just love, and there's just a lot of heart behind it. But does it matter? Are you preaching to the choir? I mean, that's a whole other discussion. But what keeps you working? I mean, are you writing to entertain? Are you writing to make dough? Not mutually exclusive. You're writing because you got something to say. Because you got no choice.
Writing personal essays are just for me to try to work this stuff out. It's continuation of like my philosophical career.
I sometimes feel like I don't know what I think until I write, until I see what comes out.
It is. I'm an external thinker, but not verbally. Like it makes sense when it goes from my brain to my fingertips.
Yeah. Magic.
I guess we're towards the end. I guess I have one last question where I'm trying to think. You said you started taking like mescaline when you were like 14. And I'm like, did you start taking it? Like, was there any fear about it? Was there any in this, and again, when I was still in my adulthood, it's scary to me to change my brain.
Well, there was nothing but fear, but the fear is the point. Once you do that and you realize there's this whole other way to be outside of what you were fed as you were growing up, which, was the cornball sort of hippie ethos. But, punk had its own version of that. And, I think you just sort of, you got to fucking destroy your mind to find what else is happening. I mean, I'm not advocating this for the kids, but, I on some way, drugs saved me until they killed me.
Yeah. I mean, have you, in kind of sobriety from that stuff, have you figured out ways to get there?
Well, it's funny you say that. Speaking of Selby again, I remember when I first got clean, because he sort of helped me along those lines. I remember sort of whining to him like, oh man, I'm afraid I'm going to lose my fucking edge, if I'm not, down, if I'm not out there copped over. I'm just like, you fucking asshole. You don't even realize how fucking insane you are until you're off of everything and you see what's been under there the whole time. It's almost like every year that I'm off drugs is like another version of why another revelation about why I needed them in the first place, because that's where the terrifying shit is. The mescaline, yeah, it's terrifying, or, whatever the fuck it is, acid, before switching to the more utilitarian, needle drugs. Once you're off of everything, man, and you see what's underneath, that's what I wrestle with. I mean, that's even with this book, putting myself in a situation to feel what it's like and not having the recourse, the sort of the sugar tit of heroin, to not my phrase, to sort of calm yourself down and escape into. You're just in it, and writing about those feelings, at least I aspire and hope, somehow through that personal tormenting weirdness, which you can A, render funny, and B, there's something universal about the feelings that are unearthed by that very discomfort.
Yeah. I think that's right. Did you know when you went to you went to Pottstown, right? You said you were sent away.
Yes, I was.
Did you know anyone there? Did you have any
No,
kind of like?
No, man. I had never even met rich people. Like, I had never seen a fucking stereo, and suddenly I'm shipped away to like the Hill School in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, which is like, this is like I can't even pronounce. Do you ever have words that you write but you don't know how to pronounce? One of those for me, Scion, Scion. Anyway,
Scion, I think,
it was the Republican descendants of that, Senator Danforth people, great guy. And I just felt so alienated that I just found a group of other completely fucked up, even if they were rich guys, they were the fucked up guys, and that's how I discovered using drugs on a daily basis just to get through the quotidian monotony and horror of like having to go to chapel every day, and put on a blue blazer. And this is in the 70s, and having to have a short haircut, but in a way it's good if you're young at that age to have something to fucking rub up against and rebel against, but, yeah, man, I was beyond alienated, and the only Jew yet again.
This is a unanswerable question, but I'll ask it anyway to see if it prompts anything. But like, do you think that's a hinge point in your life? Do you think like if you had stayed in Pittsburgh, maybe it would have gone in a different direction? Yeah,
I think I was exposed to a lot of things I might not have been exposed to, outside of seeing how the other half live, which is, ho fucking hum. But just, the daily narcotic and psychedelic intake. But the way I learned to do drugs wasn't like in some flamboyant, I'm in San Francisco, let my freak flag fly. It was sort of almost the opposite. I had to get high sort of on the down low and pass. So the way drugs for me were a way of enduring the square world, but you couldn't let that world know what you were doing. It's like, when you go into that supermarket at 3 a.m, don't bust out laughing or you're going to end up on the ground being carried away, screaming and pissing your pants,
Mm-hmm. Jerry, thank you so much for joining me.
I hope this, this is called Beginnings, right? This show. Mm-hmm. So this is essentially, you're getting at the origins of, where we started. That's such a great premise, man.
Yeah. I think, how do you feel? Do you think we did it? I think the shame cocktail and the like anti-Semitism, I think it all seems to like be a foundation from which you sprung, but
sure. Yeah. The inappropriate mommy cuddling, throw that in the mix, all that stuff. Not anything that other people haven't endured worse and weirder, but definitely, that was on the menu. So, I hope your audience can relate to some of this. And, the book's full of this shit. So, yeah, for better or worse.
It's great. I like just read right through it. I devoured it. It's so good.
Thank you, man. Well, good luck with everything. Your unnamed shows. Sounds very cool. And I'm really glad to meet you, man. I hope you stay in touch.
Yeah. This was great. Thanks again.
Later, man.
And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, oh, 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 bye. Bye.